31 matches, 5 different locations and 8 teams all striving to become the 2025 Women's Cricket World Champion. The competition started on the 30th of September. We are 3 games played by each team, so now felt like a good time to sit down and talk about the Women's World Cup, who's doing well, who's not doing so well, and make some predictions about who may raise the trophy on the 2nd of November. Going into the 2025 Women's Cricket World Cup, Australia have to be seen as the favourites. Not only are they a formidable white ball team, they come off the back of a 16-0 victory against England during the Ashes series at the top of this year, and they also hold 7 titles from the 12 renditions of this championship that we've had so far. They're currently reigning champions, having won the competition in 2022 against England in the final, with impressive contributions from Melissa Healy, Beth Mooney and Rachel Haynes, 2 of which are still in Australia's current squad. They've been a very strong team for a very long time, so it's no doubt that they're coming in as favourites to this competition. Hosts India are also up there as one of the favourites, looking to maybe be in the final with Australia. The India-Australia game is one in the group stages that's highly anticipated because they are 2 of not only the top teams in the competition, but 2 of the favourites. 4 of the 5 venues of this competition are in India, so conditions, it's a bit like any tournament that's held in India. India tend to play their own conditions the best, and it's the overseas teams that maybe struggle with that heavier spin attack or having to be able to know really how to play spin well to be able to do well. Yes, India are a strong team, but they also have that home advantage. Sri Lanka don't necessarily take it to our list of favourites. Yes, they're co-host nation. Yes, they have that slight home advantage with one of the 5 venues being in their home conditions in Colombo, but in comparison to some of the other teams we have on the list, they haven't showed of late that they're as strong, putting out quite so strong performances. It's possible we'll see some upsets, and I think an upset may come from Sri Lanka playing one of the bigger teams, but in terms of favourites to win the competition, albeit with that home advantage, they don't make it into that probable to win. England are a team that are always kind of in and about the mix. It's been an interesting time for England, obviously, as already mentioned, that 16-0 loss in the Ashes at the top of this year saw like a complete overhaul of the England camp, change of coach, change of captain. Now Nat Sciver-Brunt leads the side with Charlotte Edwards, and they've been playing kind of like okay, slightly mixed cricket in their build-up to their 2 warm-up games against Australia and India. They won both of those, so it does put them, you know, on the prefaces of like, don't write them off. But in terms of, I think your favourites going into this, before a ball was bowled, before the competition started, obviously we're now 3 games into the group stages, or 3 rounds into the group stages even. But before a bowl had even been bowled, you're probably putting Australia, then India, kind of your finalists, and England to qualify into the semi-finals, but perhaps not make it any further than that. A note to make that Grace Harris was lost from the competition before it started with a calf injury. She was withdrawn, which was a shame to see her go because she is quite a formidable force, usually a stronger T20 player than ODI, just because of the nature of her power hitting. But to know that you've got someone with Grace Harris's power coming in at your 6-7, even in an ODI, at that kind of, you expect her to come in kind of towards the end of the innings, towards the death overs, to bring that kind of final boost push to your score. So to lose a contribution like that is a disappointment for Australia. It has been kind of seen that batting depth has been a priority for almost all of the teams in this competition. We see a lot that the batters can go down to 8, 9, possibly even 10 for some teams. And it does mean that death bowling has been a real sticking point. It's been those last 10 overs that if you've still got the power, you've still got, like, again, because teams can bat so deep, if you can get to those last 10 overs and still have some power in you, it's almost like the death bowlers are not quite ready for that. They're not used to that kind of batting attack still being there at that point. And it has been a lot of the last 10 overs, especially for Australia and India. We've seen a lot of runs scored in those moments, in those last 10. And it might just be this whole, the way the team is thinking, right? If you're not thinking you're going to need really strong death bowlers because you've either bowled the team out, or you don't think the batters are going to have the oomph or the power, or you've ended up in the tail, so you're now facing bowlers with the bat, so they don't necessarily create the same opportunities to get those big runs, then maybe you're not thinking about having, or when you're bowling or selecting your bowlers, you're not thinking about needing that specialist bowler to still be available in the death. And obviously, like, you have death bowlers, and, you know, for example, for England, they usually bowl Lauren Bell for 4 at the start and then come and have another few from her if needed in the death. So, like, it's not like the teams aren't thinking about death bowling, but it's almost, it just seems to be a consistent weak spot across all of the teams as you look through the competition. Now, as I said, at the time of recording, we are 3 group stages in. The India-Australia game is currently going on whilst recording, and will still be going on when this goes live. So, you know, we won't be talking about that. We'll kind of touch on the next few rounds, and like I said, we'll do some predictions as well of what we think is going to happen at the end of the competition. But for now, we're acting as if it is the evening of the 11th of October and only 3 group games for each team has been played. We've had a few surprise games, one very big surprise game with a very, very low score for an ODI game, some very high scores as well. Starting at the bottom, we have Pakistan, who are really not having a good time of things. They had a good game against India where they looked like they'd managed to restrict them quite well. They'd wrapped up the tail very quickly, restrict India to 247, which on average the women score in an ODI around between a 5 and 6 run rate. It's kind of rare to see 300 plus scores in women's ODI, kind of proven by the numbers, as we've only had one score that has gone over 300. So normally your run rate's coming around between 5.5. 5 is a good ODI scoring, 250, anything between 250 and 300 is a competitive score. So to have kept them just shy, just under that 250 was kind of, even psychologically, it's a good place to be, right? Especially for Pakistan, but they just haven't been able to perform with the bat, really. They've never lost less than 3 wickets in the power play. So it's 2 games they lost 3, 1 game they lost 5 in the power play. When your highest contributions in the 30s, it's just not enough to be taking on, you know, high scores. And if you've got 7 of your 11 scoring single digits, you're not even going to chase down a low 100 score. So the batting seems to be where Pakistan is really struggling in this competition. I, at this point, would be quietly surprised if they get a win on the board, because even the teams that aren't necessarily the top tier teams, or like the tough teams to beat, I don't think Pakistan can bring the game. So I don't think they'll get a point on the board, unfortunately. I just don't think it's going to be a good competition for them. They're next up against England, which I predict they'll probably lose that. Again, even if they can bowl well, I just don't think they've got the batting power to take on the bowling attack that England will then put out against them. And, you know, if they're losing so many wickets in the power play, you don't win ODIs doing that. You don't win T20s losing 3 in a power play. You certainly don't lose an ODI losing 3 in a power play. So it's not been the best for them, and I don't think it's going to get much better, unfortunately, for them. Lots for them to think about, but I think predominantly it's their batting. They've had some good bowling performances, they really have, but their batting has just been unable to cope with the attack coming from the other nations. So Pakistan sits 8th at the moment at the bottom of our board. Just a quick reminder in the way that this works is that the top 4 will qualify, same as the Men's Cricket World Cup, and then you have 2 semi-final games. Winners of those go on to play in the final. 1 plays 4 and 2 plays 3. So if you have a choice, you probably want to end top of the table, because you are likely to play a team that are kind of possibly just edging through on a run rate, and possibly a team you've already beaten. So we'll get to semi-finals and finals when we make predictions, but just as a quick note while we're talking about positions in the table. Next up, Sri Lanka. Now, given Sri Lanka's dues, they're playing well. They're playing really well, and there have been moments where they've shown like flashes of a good game. So when they played against England, they had a really strong opening partnership, and they'd done well to restrict England, probably let them get a few more runs than they wanted England to, due to a fantastic century by Nat Sciver-brunt, which side just on that, she now has the most centuries in the ODI Cricket World Cup. For a female player, which is fantastic. She's got 10 overall now in her ODI career. It was a fantastic knock, a really needed knock. The opening partnership had been okay. It was a bit of a shaky innings for England against Sri Lanka, so the century from Sciver-brunt was just absolutely needed, and like a proper captain's knock. She really came in and did what she needed to do and really put England in a much stronger position than they necessarily should have or could have been. She was very lucky she was dropped on 3. So that obviously does help when you go on to put 117 on the board. But a fantastic knock for her. And that was kind of the changing point for Sri Lanka, because it was probably Sri Lanka's best chance of taking a win in these first 3 games. And they played well, they bowled well. The pitch in Colombo is quite slow, really gives a lot to the spinners, so it's a very spinner friendly, but for the batsmen it's very difficult to kind of get some pace off the pitch. So it's much more of a bowler's wicket. So it's much more of a bowler's wicket, and you know, Sri Lanka were using that much to their advantage. It was really slow scoring in the kind of between the 20 and 40th overs for England, and it looked like they were going to even struggle to get 200 at one point. So it was a good bowling performance for Sri Lanka in that game, but it just kind of seems a bit testament to Sri Lanka and the way they've been playing so far. It's been like most things have gone well, but those little bits or those little moments that help you win the game and kind of cement the victory are the bits that are missing. But you know, I think there's a win on the cards. I honestly thought they were going to win against England at one stage. Sri Lanka have 1 point on the board because of that no result with Australia, where the game got rained off in Colombo. But I don't see them qualifying, but I can see a few wins in there, and Sri Lanka may be one of those teams that causes an upset. They've obviously now, they didn't play Australia. They have played India and lost. They have played England and lost. But I can see them getting a win against a team that they don't necessarily look like they should get a win against. I think all the elements are there for Sri Lanka. It's just having it all come together in the same, and obviously getting that little bit of luck as well to help them get over the line and get some points on the board. Similar scenes for Bangladesh as we had for Sri Lanka, and again, they've had moments where they've really looked on top of a game. Again, it just comes down to the batting. I think a lot of the issues with these teams is their batting. Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh kind of suffering in the same, and they have some very strong and good bowling attacks, which means they can restrict opposition teams and they can get wickets quickly and they can really make some impacts. But when it comes to a chase and when it comes to putting the runs on the board, that's where they're falling down. They did take the victory against Pakistan. At this point, like I kind of said, kind of expected. Unfortunately, Pakistan just not really showing a lot of promise or a lot of delivery here in this competition. And that's not to say they have bad players. It's a bit like the West Indies and their test side at the moment, the men's test side at the moment, in that they have a fantastic bowling attack. But when you don't have batsmen and you don't have people who can either catch a run chase or put runs on the board to be defended, it's really hard for a good bowling attack to perform well. Because if you're only trying to defend, I don't know, 70, it's very difficult for that bowling attack to do much in terms of restricting, and unless the wicket is literally falling apart, and that's the reason the chase is so low or the score is so low. But in terms of South Africa, England, that was not the case. But we will get to that in a moment. So yeah, Bangladesh is another one that can definitely cause an upset. They play against South Africa next. South Africa, who are in need of a bit of a boost after the start to their competition, although they are in a good spot at the moment. We'll see what Bangladesh can do. They've played New Zealand, they've played England, they've played Pakistan. They lost against England and New Zealand. They won against Pakistan. They still have Australia, India, South Africa they play next, and Sri Lanka. I can see Bangladesh causing an upset. I think of the bottom 3, they've been the team that's been most put together, if that makes sense. They've had all of those elements, but more consistently than Sri Lanka and Pakistan. So watch this space for Bangladesh. I can see them really upsetting a team at the top, and could be an impact on who ends up qualifying. India, which we'll discuss in a moment, but they are looking little bit on the back foot after their recent loss against South Africa. Fifth on the table currently and just outside of qualification is New Zealand. They had a good opening game against Australia. They failed to catch the only, at the time of recording, 300 score of the competition against Australia. Australia's just formidable. And I think in that game specifically, obviously to put 237 on the board, you have to have some good contributions. But when you're chasing down 326, you need a little bit more than a few good contributions. So, I mean, they've showed well in terms of their other games. One win on the board against Bangladesh. Their closest competition is South Africa, so they will be a little disappointed that they lost that game. A very, very close game in the end. Shining stars for New Zealand have to be Sophie Devine, captain, and she took her 300th ODI cap in the second game of the competition for New Zealand. A really nice touching tribute where they gave her this lovely dedicated bat. Devine's been playing the game for 17 odd years. She's a really solid foundation of the New Zealand squad. A massive contributor to the T20 victory that they took against South Africa last year as well. So a really key and integral player to the squad. And she's really been starting to shine good with the bat. So her playing well is absolutely pivotal to New Zealand performing well in this competition. And Brooke Halliday is also performing very, very well with the bat. A fantastic partnership from them. Saw victory against Bangladesh last time out in game 3 for them of the competition, giving them that first win and their first points on the board. Their net run rate isn't too bad, minus 0.245 in comparison to South Africa's minus 0.888. So it's close. There's not a lot in that run rate. And obviously that's for South Africa really being contributed by the massive loss they had against England in their first game. So that really could still come back to help New Zealand if they get on a bit of a winning streak. It's looking like it could be between South Africa and New Zealand for that final qualification spot. But we are going to talk about India in just a second as well, because they also may be a little bit concerned looking at the games they've got coming up. But we'll move on now to talk about South Africa, who at the moment sit fourth in that final qualification spot. Now, I still don't quite understand what happened in the opening game against England, but to be bowled out in 14 overs, just over 14 overs, for 69 is a fantastically terrible showing. And it's definitely not the South Africa we know. You've got players like Lauren Woolvar, Chloe Tryon, Marizanne Kapp, Tasmin Brits, Soon Luz. There's some great players in the South Africa squad, and they're a good team. So to see them capitulate in the most phenomenal way, it wasn't even really the pitch. They played in Guwahati, which is not a bad wicket at all. It's been performing well in others. I mean, India and Sri Lanka played on it 2 days before, putting on 269 and 211. So it wasn't a slow scoring, bad batting wicket. They just didn't show up. They just didn't perform. And I don't even think the England bowling attack was that superior. It was just one of those games where nothing went right for South Africa. And you kind of proved this by then looking at the rest of their results and moving forwards. And, you know, they've now got two wins on the board against New Zealand and against India, which is a big blow for India. And that was a fantastic knock from Woolvar, Tryon, and Nadine de Klerk with some great contributions with the bat. All of those scoring 70, 49 and 84 respectively. So that really did, like, they have the power. They totally have the batting power. So when you compare that performance in beating India in the way they did and successfully catching that run chase with wickets in hand, 3 wickets in hand I think they did. I mean, it was close. It went down to the wire, 7 balls left when they caught the chase, but they did have 3 wickets in hand, and that's what you kind of need to see. And so a good bowling performance. 251 is not a small ask, but when you know you've got the batting capability that South Africa do, 251 shouldn't be, it should be a good match, which it was, but it shouldn't be a too much of an ask to catch that chase. So they're definitely back off the back of that blip. They're looking well. And again, for their run rate, if they can get a good strong win on the board, they play they play Bangladesh in this next block. So if they can get a good win on the board, they'll really kind of really beef up that run rate again and kind of negate the terrible loss that was that first game. And then I genuinely think that's where they start putting India under pressure. I think India would have expected to win that game against South Africa. So to not by like the barest of margins, to use a great phrase, that will have been a bit of an upset for India. And looking that they're now playing against Australia in their next game, they'll want to win that, knowing that Australia are kind of that point down with that no result. Because if the game is abandoned, both teams get 1 point rather than the winner getting 2 points and the loser getting none. That's how the scoring works in the Women's World Cup. So they'll be hoping to win against Australia to kind of keep that numbers up, knowing that if they lose against Australia and South Africa win against Bangladesh, they're dropping to 4th. And if New Zealand win against Sri Lanka, they'd be tied on points with India, and then we're looking at net run rates again. And then for India, it really does start to get a bit tension stations. Now, as a side note, any team that wins 5 games is guaranteed qualification. So at the moment, the only team that can do that, just because of that non-result, is England. They're the only one with a 3-for-3 win. So if they win against Pakistan and then they win their 5th game, they will automatically qualify. For England, they're going to be trying to qualify top, especially looking at whether it could be, well, maybe actually, because if it could be India, they probably won't want to qualify top. They'll happily let Australia play India again. But yeah, it kind of comes down to that, like, no team's going to throw a game, right? If you can get through a group stage of a World Cup 7-for-7, you're going to take that every day of the week. But it does start to become that question of who do you face in the semi-final? Which semi-final do you actually want to be in? And whether you think England can go 7-for-7, because against India, I can see that's going to be a tight game. Against Australia, we'll see. Let's move on and talk about India, who obviously, like I said, are in this kind of slightly sticky situation. They won their first 2, one against Sri Lanka, one against Pakistan. As another side note, all of Pakistan's games are held in Colombo. They will not play in India due to political reasons. This did mean that if they made it through to a semi-final or indeed the final, the location of that game would move. But looking at the scores and looking at the performances so far, I don't think that's something that's going to be worried about. 2 for 2 off the first 2. India were sailing pretty well, feeling pretty comfortable. And when you see South Africa get taken apart by England and are all out for 69 in 14 overs, you're probably feeling a little bit confident that you can beat them. So as I said, it's probably much of an upset for India that they didn't win that game that they probably thought they would do. And with their players like Harpreet Kaur, Simriti Mandhana, Deepti Sharma, they've got some really good players and bowlers, batters, like good contributors. They will have felt they had both bowling and batting a stronger side than South Africa. So again, to lose that has potentially put them on a slightly concerning position, especially when they play Australia, which at the time of recording, that game is going on, as I said. And if they lose that, they really do start to find themselves in that position where both South Africa and New Zealand, if they get on a good run, could see India out of the semi-final round, which would be a complete upset. So that's when you start looking at Bangladesh and being like, if you're going to upset a big team, and it is India, this could really have a massive impact on who actually manages to qualify. The 2 I'm quietly confident that will qualify are our current top 2, which is Australia and England. Australia's net run rate is more healthy than England's, but because of that non-result against Sri Lanka, they only have 5 points to England's 6. But both teams have won every game they've played. England obviously have that cushion of it had a wonderful 3.8 net run rate at the top of the competition after beating South Africa, basically played a T20 game against South Africa, which is why their net run rate was so high. The tight game against Bangladesh did make a dent in that lovely positive run rate they had, but it's still got that cushion. And the way that the net run rate is calculated, for people who don't know, it will like kind of ebb and flow throughout the group stages, and you kind of end up with an average at the end of it. So having that high input will equal out this average as we continue to go on. And although Australia's net run rate is currently stronger than England's, unless Australia have a victory like England did against South Africa, it will almost definitely be England on top if they both continue to win games. The England-Australia game, which is coming up, that will obviously be one that has a lot of people's attention. Two very strong sides, and the last time they played an ODI against each other, Australia absolutely took England to the cleaners. Now, as I mentioned, it's been a lot of change for England ahead of this World Cup, so we shall see. But yeah, that's definitely going to be a good game to watch. England take on Pakistan in this next block as well, so you'd bet on the side of them winning that. You'd bet on the side of them winning that quite comfortably as well. So it could be another nice boost to their net run rate when they play in a couple of days' time. But that is what the current standing in the Women's Cricket World Cup looks like. In terms of my predictions, I definitely think England and Australia are going to qualify. I think it's going to very much depend on what the result of the Australia-India game is as to whether they qualify. Honestly, I think the top four we have now, England, Australia, India, South Africa, are going to be the four that qualify. Whether South Africa are above India, whether Australia are above England, they remain to be seen as my question marks. I think it's going to be interesting. I think our final could be England, Australia. Of the teams we've got, of the strength they have, I believe they are the strongest two teams as of the moment, even with India having home advantage. The England-India game will also be a very interesting one in the group stages that is coming up in the next few weeks. But I think our final is going to be England-Australia. That's going to be my prediction. And it's going to hurt me to say this, but I think my prediction is Australia will win. They are on very good form. They are batting and bowling incredibly well. Even when teams seem to have them on the ropes, they find a way back. And it's very impressive to watch. So as much as I would love to see England win from a personal point of view, I am going to go with the favourites, and I'm going to back that Australia will take their 8th Cricket World Cup title on the 2nd of November, playing England. I think New Zealand are just going to miss out on qualification just because of the way that things have gone so far. And I think South Africa have got back in their groove. I think it was always going to be between South Africa and New Zealand. I think that home advantage will see India through to the qualification stage. That would see either England play South Africa or England play India, and then Australia play the other one. If those guys are top two, which is, I think those two, England and Australia, will finish the group stages top two as well. So it is possible to have an England-Australia final, and I think that's what we're going to get. It would be very interesting to see South Africa play England in a semi-final, considering how poorly South Africa did play against them in the group stage, because there will be a part of South Africa that have a point to prove that that was a one-off, a blip, and that they're way better than that, and that they can beat England. And England would definitely need to go into that game knowing that South Africa will come out swinging. So I think it's really exciting. There's some really exciting potential matchups coming. I've been really enjoying watching what I can of this series. I can't wait to continue watching it, and I can't wait to talk more with you about it. But please do let me know your predictions. Who do you think will be the 4 who qualify into the semi-finals? What semi-final games do you think you get? Who do you think is going through to the final? And who do you think is taking the 2025 crown? I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts and opinion on this. Next time on our full Round the Stumps episode, we will be talking about substitutes, injury substitutes, and whether or not they should be included in the world of cricket. So keep thinking caps on for that, because I'd also love to continue the discussion with you. And as we now have, the Power Play podcast will come out next week, give you a little roundup of some things that have been going on outside of the Women's World Cup in the world of cricket, just some bite-sized highlights, because we've had some very interesting developments that I would love to hear your thoughts on. But that is it for today. I do hope you enjoyed this episode of Round the Stumps. Please let me know your thoughts, feelings, and anything else you'd love to discuss down in the comments, either here on YouTube, on Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for being with me, and I will speak to you all very soon. Going round the stumps.